In this video, I'm checking out a lens from Samyang that is a couple of years old now. In fact, on the front of the box, it says Design Award 2017, so this is between 2 and 3 years old. On this channel, I haven't tried a whole lot of Samyang lenses in general. For those of you who don't know, Samyang and Rokinon are basically the same company. Their lenses are primarily made in Korea. They are pretty good performers. Let's see what comes in this little box. There's not much to the packaging. There is some foam, there's an instruction manual, and the lens comes in a nice little zipper pouch. With the lens, you get a front and a rear lens cap, as you would expect, and that is pretty much it. Taking a closer look at the lens, it is very, very tiny. It's very small, very compact. But the biggest thing that you'll notice about this lens is just how light it is. The weight on this comes in at just 85 grams, which is next to nothing. This lens has an aluminum alloy housing. The rear mount is aluminum. You'll see there are electronic connections because this lens does support autofocus. There's a Samyang logo on one side, and really not a whole lot around the rest of it. There is a compact focus wheel. This lens does support autofocus with a manual focus override, so that is pretty nice. Moving towards the front of the lens, you'll see that it looks like there's not a whole lot here. It says AF 2.8 FE, but what you'll notice is this part of the lens actually detaches. And what this is a lens hood, believe it or not. It looks like a very strange lens hood because I don't know how much light this thing is actually going to block out, but as you remove the lens hood that is made out of plastic, you'll see that is how compact this little lens is. Minimum focusing distance of 0.35 of a meter or 1.15 of a foot, and 49mm filter thread. The front lens element is very compact. It is not flat, it is concave. And if you take a really close look, you'll see the 7-blade aperture with rounded blades. This tiny pancake lens has 7 elements in 6 groups, which is pretty impressive for how compact and lightweight this thing feels. And on the mount, you'll see this lens is made in Korea. I'd say it almost feels a little bit cheap when you first take it out of the package, but let's see what this lens can do. All these shots were taken handheld with my A6100. This is, actually brought this lens through in an extra bag when we were out on our trip through Colorado. So here are some street photography shots from Denver. Ready, set, go. That is it for these sample photos. The thing that blew me away about this lens is I was expecting the old style, super loud, noisy autofocusing system. For some reason, I thought that this was of that vintage type period where you kind of hear that bzz, 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 that you get with older Canon DSLRs. But the autofocus on this lens is very quiet. Now you can hear it, but it is pretty silent. Let me see if I can get my microphone to pick it up. It is very, very faint, and I would say in most situations where you have a little bit of ambient noise, even if you use the onboard microphone on a camera such as the A6100, you probably won't be able to hear the autofocus. Unless you're in a silent room, if you're in a church or something like that, in that case you might be able to hear something, but in most cases you should be absolutely fine. Now, speaking of the autofocus, Performance was really surprisingly good. Again, I was expecting it to be much worse. On my A6100, this lens focused quickly and accurately with no issues when it came to taking photographs. Now with videos, I didn't shoot a whole bunch of videos with it, but I did in fact use this little lens to record the talking head portion of my latest video, and it stayed with me throughout the entire recording, which that video was like 30 minutes of continuous recording. As far as sharpness, I was expecting it to be much worse. Wide open at f2.8 in the center of the image, it is decently sharp, and as you stop down to f4, it gets really sharp. Even in the corners, wide open at f2.8, it is more than enough and certainly sharper than what you get with a kit lens. To test out how sharp this little lens was, I decided to put it up against a lens that I know is very sharp, and that is the Sigma 30mm f1.4. Using the same camera and the same settings at f2.8, you'll see that the Samyang is just a touch less sharp than the Sigma 30mm. As you stop both lenses down to f4, you'll see there is basically no difference between the two of them. This little Samyang is just as sharp as the Sigma 30mm at f4, which is again a surprise and a pleasant one at that. You'll also notice in those comparisons that it has some really nice bokeh. I wouldn't say it's the creamiest bokeh in the world, certainly not up there with the Sigma 56 f1.4, but it is very decent, not busy, not distracting. Putting this little lens on a full frame camera such as this Sony A7, I found the results were equally impressive. Autofocus performance, even with an older camera body such as this one, was nice and snappy, nice and quiet. Even with videos, I was able to get some decent autofocus performance out of this camera. So thus far, this is a pretty good performing lens. Now, this is where it gets even better, because when I look at distortions such as flaring, it is basically non-existent. There is a tiny bit of it, but surprisingly, this little compact, flat, pancake lens hood does a very good job of filtering out lens flare. As far as chromatic aberration, again, surprisingly, there is very little of it. I don't see much purple fringing in these photos. I do see a little bit of green outlines, but it is not distracting and it is very, very well controlled. On a full frame camera, barrel distortion is also very well controlled. There's almost none that you need to correct for, but there is some vignetting, especially wide open at f2.8. Again, vignetting you can easily correct with some photoshopping skills or using Lightroom. As you stop this lens down to f4 and f5.6, the vignetting disappears, as it does with most every other lens out there. As far as negatives, I really have just three really nitpicky points. Number one is it does feel a little bit cheap. Not saying that it's gonna break on you, but the fact that it's so lightweight, it feels like it's completely made out of plastic, even though it has some aluminum alloy with it. It's just something to be aware of. It doesn't feel like a premium lens. It feels cheaper than a lot of full metal manual lenses that I've tested over the years. Number two is the slight autofocus noise. Again, I don't think it's a huge issue, but for some people, it might be an issue. I would just recommend using external audio, external recorder, or using some sort of Rode microphone mounted on the side of your camera. Number three is there is no weather sealing, and that might be an issue for a lot of folks because most of the Sony full frame cameras do come weather sealed, and a lot of the APS-C cameras even are weather sealed. But if you have a lens that doesn't have a little rubber gasket around the outside, potentially you can get some water in there or some dust or sand or something like that. But this little Samyang is a good little lens. It is certainly a lens that I could recommend and I would recommend, especially when you consider the price, because right now, I'll be honest with you guys, I paid $159 for this lens because Amazon had some warehouse deal sale going on. I see these lenses go on sale for around $200 here in the US all the time. And that is exciting for me because I know that Samyang is coming out with a bunch of newer autofocus lenses for Sony E mount. In fact, I think they announced one just recently, which I am planning on testing out in the near future. So look out for those. Thank you guys so much for all of your likes, comments, and support. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think of this lens. Have you ever seen it, heard of it, use it? Always curious to read those. Stay tuned for more and have a nice day. Bye-bye.